Yeah, and uh, one thing that I do pay attention to when I'm in conversation with people is a lot of people fail to realize that Christianity has its roots in Africa. And I hear narratives sometimes where majority of the slaves that came on this side of the world were Muslim or what have you. And so I guess how do we reconcile that? Because sometimes you deal with people who are Pan Africanists, or there's a lot of contention, I guess. So how should we reconcile that as Christians here in America? Does it matter that majority of slaves of the enslaved were Muslim, or how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, well, first, you mentioned Pan Africanism. That's interesting. Pan Africanism has Christian roots. A guy by
Right.
the name of Alexander Crummell, who was a black Christian man, gives us the foundation of Pan Africanism. And so I know Dr. Umar Johnson calls himself the Prince of Pan Africanism, but clearly Alexander Crummell precedes him. So if Dr. Umar is the prince, Alexander Crummell is the king.
Right.
W.B. Du Bois even writes about Alexander Crummell in his book. And so it's important that we understand. Now, I recognize that it is different now, but again, these are black Christians who knew the difference between white supremacist view of scripture and authentic scripture. Secondly, when you talk about Arab invasions, that was the 6th century. We have African Christians that precede that. So you're talking about Athanasius, who was at the Council of Nicaea. The primary
Right.
voice is an African man. Tertullian, who gives us the concept of the Trinity, is an African man. Shenouda of Retreat, who gives us meditative reflection, is an African man. Cyprian is an African man. Cyril of Alexandria is an African man. Perpetua and Felicity, 2 African female martyrs who gave their life for the faith. All of this is before the Arab invasion of Northern Africa. So the idea that now there was an Arab invasion, and so tons of them were Muslim. But if you study the writings of Dr. David Daniels, he writes about how many African Christians were on those slave trips. Because if we even go back to Acts 8 on to Acts 13, you see Africans on Paul's church planting team in Acts 13 when they lay hands on Paul and they commission him. And some of them are Africans who were sent to spread the gospel. You don't see the first European convert into Acts chapter 16 when you see a European convert, or convert on European soil known as Lydia in Acts chapter 16. So if we just look at the scripture and we look at history, that narrative simply doesn't add up. But part of the problem, Reverend, is that people, we're good on emotions in some circles, but not knowledge. And that's why Paul rebuked that. He said they had a zeal. Not that zeal is bad, but he said without knowledge. And so it's important that we have knowledge of this rich Christian history and the black presence in the Bible, but also Christianity in Africa.
What's happening? This is Deontay Carroll, host of Turn Up the Volume podcast. Listen, do me a favor. If you like this video, do yourself a favor and hit the subscribe button. Also, tap the bell and turn on all of your notifications to see this and more interviews and more shows from my podcast right here on my YouTube page. So y'all hit that like button, tag, share, and subscribe. Y'all be good.